I forgot to mention that I do have a short little video of what it looks like after one of my seizures. So I will leave the link to that video in the description box. It's on a YouTube channel that I used to have, and for the life of me I can't remember the password, so I don't know how to get into it. But if anybody's interested in taking a peek at that, yeah, I'll leave it in the description box as well. Hey guys, it's Adrienne. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than my usual content. Let me play around with this camera a little bit. I'm always playing around with my with the camera in the middle of my videos. So today is November 1st, which is the start of Epilepsy Awareness Month. And I think many of y'all already know that I do have epilepsy and I do have seizures. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my seizures, some of my experiences, as well as the type of epilepsy I have, because there are numerous types of epilepsy. Just because I feel like there's not, the level of epilepsy awareness is not great. Most people have no idea. Most people haven't seen a seizure. Most people don't know what to do during a seizure. At least that's been my experience. So, you know, I have 3 different types of seizures. I have myoclonic seizures, petit mal seizures, and grand mal seizures. And I was diagnosed at 12 years old with juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. I was supposed to grow out of it, but I never did. Which, that's the reason why I can't drive. I never grew out of it, so I never learned to drive. And at least from what my neurologist tells me, in the state of Texas, you have to be 3 years entirely seizure-free to be able to legally get a driver's license. And if you get a driver's license knowing that you have epilepsy and have seizures, and you happen to get in a car accident, you can actually face involuntary manslaughter charges if you were to kill somebody in a car accident. So I've just never learned to drive. I've never gone 3 years without a seizure. So, you know, the myoclonic seizures that I have are very mild. I don't lose consciousness. And in fact, people without epilepsy can have myoclonic seizures. Basically, it's just a muscle twitch. You know, like sometimes I'll get a twitch right above this eyelid, and it'll just twitch for about 20 minutes. It won't, you know, and it doesn't affect my consciousness or anything. It just twitches. Or I'll get them right here, which those are really mild. I've had some myoclonic seizures that were full body, and they look like a grand mal, except I'm conscious for the entire thing, which that's probably the scariest seizure I've ever had. I've only had those, I think, once or twice. Usually my myoclonics are just, you know, one little muscle area, you know, but once or twice I've had a full body myoclonic, and it was terrifying because it was like being trapped in your body, but your body is flopping around and hitting the floor and hitting furniture, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And thankfully I've only had those once or twice, but you can feel everything you know, it hurts when your body hits that floor, but you've got no control over it. You know, you're just freaking out, but you're awake. It's scary. It's a hard thing to articulate because, you know, unless you've had one, it's just scary. And I can only imagine what people, you know, the kind of fear that people must feel, you know, when I've had seizures. Now, my petit malls, y'all have probably seen those like a lot. For those of you that have been watching my channel since I started it, or even, you know, just within the last couple of months, y'all have definitely seen, hi baby, y'all have definitely seen me have petit malls on video and probably not realize what they are. Usually they look like my eyes will flutter, or my eyes will close, or I'll stare off into space, and it only lasts maybe a second or two. And then it's usually preceded, or excuse me, it's usually followed up by a loss of train of thought. I won't remember what I'm talking about or what I was talking about for a few minutes. Sometimes it can make my videos a little bit confusing, or at least it does for me. I know in one of my tutorial videos, I think it was the first part of my crochet skull pants, I was trying to get that video out because I had mentioned that I was going to get it out on a certain day, so I felt like I had a deadline, and I was trying to film that tutorial while I was having petit malls, and then later I went back and watched it, and there is 2 separate mistakes in that video where I said something but I meant something else. I think the first one was in row 2, I think, where I said double crochet instead of single crochet, and in the tutorial I said double instead of single, but you can clearly see like I made a single crochet. So it was almost like my hands already knew what I was doing, but because my brain wasn't functioning properly, it was just doing whatever, and my hands just kept going the way it was supposed to go. And so, you know, I know that you guys have probably seen that in some of my videos. Now, my grand malls, the grand malls is what usually scares everybody else, but they're not scary for me because I'm unconscious. So the grand malls, for those of you that don't know about seizures, they're basically the types of seizures that you see in movies, is the best way I can describe it. You know, my whole body convulses. You know, sometimes I will stop breathing. I usually throw up on myself. I usually pee on myself. I have been told that without fail, every single time I have a grand mal, I scream like I'm being murdered, and I grab my head and rake my fingernails down the side of my face, and then I drop to the floor and start convulsing. Now it's been almost 3 years. My last grand mal was in November of 2019. So I don't remember exactly what day, but you know, I'm coming up on 4 years without a grand mal. I think 2019, 2020, 21, yeah, almost 4 years. But those grand mals they're the ones that I've probably had the most injuries from. I have woken up on the bathroom floor with 2 black eyes. I've broken multiple teeth in my mouth. I've stop. There's probably about a 50-50 chance during a grand mal that I'm going to quit breathing, which we don't usually call EMS if I stop breathing, or that we don't usually call EMS if I have a seizure. If I stop breathing and my family can't get me to start breathing, or I don't just start breathing again on my own, that's when they'll call EMS, because there's been a handful of times where I've quit breathing and I'm turning blue. But usually we don't call EMS because, you know, my seizures are just part of my life. That's just part of it. But I have, you know, I've busted my lip. Thankfully, I've never had any broken bones, and I've never had anything that I needed stitches for. But, you know, I know there was when I was in high school, for a while, I was going to high school in Austin, Texas, and I had to take a taxi from my dad's work to school each day. And I had met this taxi driver, and it was usually him that would pick me up. I think that was just his shift or something. I'm not really sure. But he had a brother that had epilepsy, and his brother was living alone, and he had this huge fireplace, and his brother actually burned to death because his brother had a seizure and had a grand mal and fell into the fireplace. So, like, I'm super grateful that nothing like that has ever happened. You know, I've been seeing the same neurologist for, probably the last 20 years. You know, I'm 34 now, so, I mean, I've been seeing him since I was 14 or 15. And he has always advised that I do not live alone. So I've never lived alone. I've never, you know, learned to drive, because in the state of Texas, you have to have at least 3 years seizure-free. I don't remember if I already said this or not. But I've never been able to achieve 3 years. And that's for all of the seizures. Like, I can't have petit mals. I can't have grand mals. And the thing is I have petit mals every single day without fail. Even with my medication, I still have petit mals every day. Some days it's 1 or 2. Some days it's 20 or 30. It just depends on the day. And then also, my seizures, my biggest seizure trigger is stress, particularly the hormone adrenaline and the hormone cortisol, which both occur heavily when a person is extremely stressed out. And so both of those specific hormones immediately send me into seizures. Excuse me. And, you know, so stress in my life is a big, big thing. You know, my kids, my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, they're all really big about, and sometimes it's kind of annoying because I'm like, I'm fine. Like, y'all are stressing out more than I am. But, like, if they think something is going to stress me out, they won't tell me about it because they're so afraid of me having a seizure. And the weird thing is, and my mom has said that it drives her nuts, because I live with this, you know, condition, and it doesn't bother me. I go about my life the best way I can, and I do what I do, and it doesn't, my seizures, I have them, but I don't allow them to scare me from doing anything. If I could find somebody to teach me how to drive, I would learn to drive. Even if it's just to go like 3 miles up the road, you know, or you know, I'm not saying like I would drive cross country, but, you know, if I learned how to drive, I could, you know, drive to my mom's house. I could, you know, because she lives like 6 miles up the road. That's it. But the fear of having a seizure, for me, is just not there. Now, my family, on the other hand, they're terrified of my seizures. You know, they know how to handle them, and they know how, you know, what to do when I go into one. But there's always that residual fear that if, you know, if this happens or that happens, Adrian might have a seizure. And for me, that's annoying, but for them, it's the other way around, because I just have no fear of my seizures. They're just a part of my life. You know, and, you know, I've never actually seen anybody have a seizure, like a grand mal. I've never seen what everybody else has seen. You know, I've never seen myself have a seizure. I've never seen anybody else have a seizure outside of fictional movies. So I don't know what a real seizure looks like. And maybe that's why it doesn't scare me. It could also be because when I have my grand mals, I'm unconscious. Now, the only, like I said, the only 2 seizures I've ever had were the myoclonic seizures. They were full body myoclonic seizures, and those scared me. But I've only ever had 2. Why be afraid of something that doesn't really happen? You know, and I'm saying that, and then watch, tomorrow I'll have one. It'll be just my luck. But so the thing about juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, at least my diagnosis is juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, and then it's got I've got a secondary diagnosis called complex partial seizures. And what that means is that when I have a seizure, it can start in one portion of my brain, and then it spider webs across the rest of my brain. So I'll have a seizure, and, you know, all these electrical impulses are going off in one hemisphere of my brain, but as it does, it spider webs across to the other side of my brain. At one point, we looked at brain surgery. We looked at getting something called the vagal nerve implant, which is something that goes in the nerve, in the vagal nerve right here. And from what I understand, when somebody is having a grand mal, you can go over to that person and you wave a magnet over this implant, and it will actually pull the person out of a seizure. However, I'm not a candidate for that surgery either, because of the way my seizures work and the spider webbing across my brain. Of course, that's why cutting a portion of my brain out wouldn't work, because they start randomly. Most of them apparently start in the temporal lobe, but they spider web across my whole brain. I mean, cutting a small portion out isn't going to fix the problem. So I take seizure medication twice a day, every day. And I take 2 different kinds, which right now I am taking. Right now, the fact that I don't have insurance actually plays a huge part in which medications I can and can't take, because the best medication that has worked for me, I just can't afford. So, I mean, and not to mention, apparently there is a 20% difference between name brand and generic medicines. I don't know really what that means, but I know my neurologist, when I did have insurance, had it in my file that I had to only have name brand, because apparently there is a 20% difference. That's what he said. I'm not sure a 20% difference in what, you know what I mean? Like, does it work 20% better? Or what? Like, is there something chemically that is 20% different between the two? So I'm on, you know, my medications, you know, and they are helping. Like I said, I haven't had a grand mal in almost 4 years, but I do still have breakthrough petit mals every single morning. Now, the medications that I've been on, they have had a huge effect on my kidneys, on my liver. For a long time, I was having to go get my blood checked every 2 or 3 weeks to make sure that my liver wasn't shutting down. You know, there's a lot of side effects that come with seizure medications. And, you know, seizures are different for everybody. And they are, it depends on who you are, what your diagnosis is. You know, they told me that I could have been having seizures from the time of birth and nobody noticed it. Because with juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, typically the seizures start off very mild, and as you get older, they will get worse. You'll start out with myoclonics, then you'll start having petit mals, and then you'll have grand mals. But usually by the time that you're in your 20s, you've completely grown out of it, and the seizures will just go away on their own. That's not what happened at all to me. But you know, I'm gonna leave some links in the description box below. I'm sorry if you guys can hear that rain. It's fixing a storm here. Let me shut this door. Maybe that'll help. 1 second. So, I'm going to leave some description, or some links in the description box in case anybody's interested in learning a little bit more about seizures. I just want to kind of get, I feel like there's not a lot of awareness. You know, when I first had my very first grand mal seizure, I was probably about 15 years old, and I had it in the middle of the cafeteria. So I was a sophomore in high school, and nobody knew what to do. None of the teachers knew what to do, and they let me lay there turning blue. And you know, my boyfriend at the time, he had been to some of my doctor's appointments. We'd been together for a while, and he knew what to do, but the teachers would not let him get near me. He was actually physically restrained by 2 teachers when this happened, and the teachers and the principals let me lay on the floor and just flop around. My best friend, she almost got expelled because she left the cafeteria and ran to the office and took the phone out of the secretary's hand, hung up, and dialed 911, and they almost expelled her over that. You know, but I did, thankfully I got to EMS. I mean, if it hadn't been for Ashley and Joshua, I may or may not be here, to be honest, because the school had no idea what to do. None whatsoever. You know, and my brother, Zachary, he worked as a bus driver and a mechanic for the same school that we went to high school in, and he said that there's absolutely no training whatsoever as far as seizures go, which I thought was really weird. I mean, I think, you know, I've never worked in a school district, but it seems like that would be something that teachers and bus drivers would need to do or need to know. You know, especially in a public school type setting. Casey, you know, she doesn't go to the same school that I went to, but, you know, she recently found out that her friend, you know, Casey's only 9 years old, and she's been around seizures her whole life. She's seen me have seizures. So it's not a scary thing for her. but she has a friend who was recently diagnosed with seizures, and she went into a seizure on the school bus, and her and Benjamin were telling me that everybody on the bus was freaking out. Of course the kids are going to freak out, but you know, they told me that the bus driver was freaking out and screaming and honking the horn and yelling at this little girl's siblings to get away from her. The best people in that situation probably to deal with that have some idea to deal with it is probably her older siblings, but she wouldn't let anybody get near her. And the thing is especially with a grandma, you know, when a person goes in to a grandma, that, you know, a lot of people think you're supposed to stick a wallet or something in their mouth. That is a total wives' tale. That is not something you're supposed to do. It's not recommended. You're never supposed to stick your fingers or anything like that in the mouth of a person that's having a seizure. You're supposed to call, one second, my door's blown open. We're having quite the thunderstorm this morning. But when a person goes into a seizure, the first thing you're supposed to do is call EMS, and then at that point you're supposed to try to keep them turned on their side so that if they do vomit, they don't choke on the vomit. You can't actually swallow your tongue. You're not going to choke to death on your tongue. But what can happen is during a seizure, if you throw up, you can choke to death on that throw up. And people don't realize that. In fact, if you were to put a wallet in somebody's mouth that was having a seizure, that's going to make it worse, probably, if they throw up. And then, of course, you try to pull them away from any furniture or move furniture away so they can't hurt themselves as bad. Cushion their heads the best that you can, and stay calm. Like, that's a big thing, is staying calm. When I was younger, when I'd have a grandma, if I regained consciousness, I didn't know what was going on, and if there was people panicking, then I would panic. I would come out of the seizure and I wouldn't know what was going on, and there have been many times where I would get violent, you know, and you know, I've swung on people. I have tried to crawl away, which is super hard because you're not really physically able to do that. But when you come out of a seizure and everybody's panicking and you don't know why you're on the floor, you don't have any memory of how you got there, you panic too. And because that's one thing with my grandmas, I lose about an hour or two, sometimes two, worth of memory from before I had the seizure, and then I can lose anywhere's. There's a thing called a postictal state after seizures, where the tractor's running, but there's nobody behind the wheel. Like, I can sort of respond, but later I'm not going to remember doing any of this stuff. And that can last hours. So one of the biggest things as far as seizures go that I can tell people is, if you see somebody having a seizure, stay calm. Do not freak out. Do not panic. You know, don't. That's really bad for everybody involved. And this video is turning out much longer than I expected, but seizures have been a big thing throughout my entire life. They've affected every aspect of my life, and the fact that there is, I don't want to say a lack of information, because we have a lot of information on it, but nobody knows that information. So I'm gonna try to cut this video short because I could probably carry on for another hour explaining and telling and talking about this, because it's a huge thing in my life, and for me it's a huge thing to get the word out about seizures. I'm always telling people about seizures and trying to educate people on how to handle them, how to, you know, just that kind of thing. But November is Epilepsy Awareness Month, and in case you were wondering, epilepsy does have an awareness ribbon, and it is purple, which the purple awareness ribbon is actually for epilepsy, Alzheimer's, lupus, Crohn's. It stands for a lot of things, but in case anybody was wondering, there is an awareness ribbon for epilepsy. And if you guys are still with me, I know this is a long video, but if you're with me, thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any questions about seizures, drop them in the comments below. If I get enough questions, maybe I can do like a frequently asked question video if anybody's that interested about in learning about seizures. Maybe I could do a second video this month about seizures. I don't know. You know, just y'all leave me some comments if you have any questions about seizures, or just even tell me if you know somebody, or if you have epilepsy. Let me know in the comments. Let me know some of your experiences, because I think it would be interesting. I've never met anybody else who had seizures. Oh, I take that back. Actually, I recently met a friend of my mom's that does have seizures, but his were caused by a car accident, whereas mine are poor genetics, I guess. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I really hope you guys found it informative. I would even appreciate it if you guys shared this video, because I really want to bring some attention to epilepsy, and I just think there's a certain lack of education and awareness when it comes to seizures in general. So yeah, if you enjoyed it, found it informative, please give it a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe. This is not my usual content. For those of you who are new to my channel, this is not my usual content, but excuse me, you know, if you feel like subscribing, that would be awesome as well. And I will see you guys in my next video.